Hi, everyone, and welcome back to yet another cracking edition of the Matt Brown Show. This is the Secrets of Fail series where we're talking to entrepreneurs and CEOs all about their epic business blunders. And with us in the hot seat today is none other than Mark Montgomery, the CEO of KYield. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it.
No, you're very welcome, mate. So let's get on with the show. Let's start with the elevator pitch. What are you guys up to there at KYield?
Well, KYield stands for Yield Management Knowledge, and that is a theorem that underpins the systems that we created from 26 years of R&D. And it manifests in the KOS, which is the world's first, and to my awareness, still only enterprise-wide artificial intelligence operating system. So not to be confused with a computer operating system, it's an organizational operating system that can be tailored to each organization by the organization itself and the people in it.
So who are your customers typically?
In the early stages, we had to focus on the very, very large organizations, right? And but now the price point has come down that we're about to spring it on mid-markets and small business, which has been a long-term goal. So I'm actually pretty pleased about that.
That's awesome, man. Well, congratulations. 26 years of R&D sounds like a nightmare to me. So congrats on persevering on that one. But we don't have time for all the information that I'm sure you have to share with our audience today, but we got to get on with the show. So what is your epic story of fail, Mark, for our audience around the world today?
Well, because of the R&D and the long phase, which we realized, I was actually incubating KYield on the side while running an early stage VC firm based in Arizona, and we had we didn't have a lot of support in Arizona. We worked globally, right? But we had a lot of support from California and Washington, and so we had another firm, VC firm that I liked a lot, a founder that wanted to merge with us. And the investors wanted us to merge, and they were interested in KYield. In 2008, so we moved over there, unanimous, all my advisors who are, some amazing people and mentors, and, you got to do this. So we went over there in 2008, just in time for the financial crisis, which we were kind of expecting, but we had no idea that it was going to be, the end of the world scenario. And the investors in the other VC firm were illiquid. They were major institutions, and it was just a complete disaster. And so we had one of these 1 year get to know each other kind of things. And fortunately, at the end of the year, after spending a huge amount of money, we walked away and landed in New Mexico to finish our R&D. But that we're primarily self-funded. We have some small investors to date, but that amount of money, well into the six figures, would have come in handy about now where we're ramping up and scaling the business. So,
yeah, I'm sure. So, Mark, what did that experience teach you? Like, what do you take forward today in your business?
Well, I think probably the most important thing, and I'd already learned it, so it's one of those, I'm not a new kid. Like you, I've had a dozen businesses over the decades. So, but one of the things that it taught me is that even though the evidence, and here I am a real data guy, an evidence guy, but sometimes your instincts are better than the evidence that is presented to you. And that's one of those situations where my instincts were saying, don't go to Silicon Valley. We've got this housing bubble, and the timing it was premature for KYield. If we'd done the A round, then a large A round, we would have needed enormous sums of money, like a Palantir or something. And that isn't our specialty. We're not fundraisers. So it probably would have flamed out. So by luck, by chance, it ended up working out. But yeah, it was, that's the lesson I learned. And I think actually most of my advisors who told me to go learned too. So
yeah,
it was an epic fail for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's true what you say there. I think intuition's actually it's a skill set that's, like as you said, you can be presented with data, but sometimes data doesn't tell the whole truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It tells you some of it, but not everything. And so sometimes you just have to connect the dots, but the way that you do that's not just looking for other data point references. It's actually working with your intuition, right? Your sense, your intuitive intelligence to say, well, is this actually a move that I want to make or not? And I think the world's over-indexed towards data because data is like the new oil, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so, for AI, it's like, what do you need to build an AI program? Well, you need data. So large language learning models rather. And so data. But you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think when it comes to decision making on what to train and sometimes it's more than data, it's about intuition.
Yeah, I mean, if you had access to all the high quality data in the world, you could make perfect decisions, right? But we just don't. And so you're always using partial data or partial good information. And I look at intuition as being, everything that you've learned in your life sort of stored that you have access in your brain versus that slice of data that you're looking at to make a decision. That's kind of how I look at it. So
absolutely. I agree with you. So Mark, if you could get into the Matt Brown Show time machine and kind of do things differently, what would you do differently and why?
Well, in that case, I would have stayed in Arizona because we had exited everything except for our little mini ranch, and we were in a good position. We had the most, assets we've ever had, and we were well funded to without needing any extra VC or anything else. But after that experience, I mean, that really set us back a lot, and in combination with, I also made another sort of mistake that was combined with it was for the first time ever, I put a bunch of money with wealth managers rather than manage it myself. And, so we just watched the stock market decline and lost a huge amount of money there too, right? So it was a combination of burning all this money living over in Silicon Valley with no income and then having our retirement savings and everything else taking a crash. So those two things, if we would have stayed, the property was paid off and, we were in good shape. So it was a pretty steep lesson there.
I'm sure, mate. I'm sure. So what is your advice, Mark, when it comes to the importance of failure or failing and becoming successful as a CEO?
Well, yeah, that's a big question. Lots of different lessons, but fortunately, I had learned from earlier mistakes. When I was very young, a young entrepreneur, I wouldn't have done what I did then. And I didn't do in other businesses where I took on too much debt and I placed too much confidence in investors and in markets rather than myself, right? In my own decision making, I was too young and I didn't have the confidence yet in myself and my own decision making. So I placed too much of my future in the hands of others, right? As a young entrepreneur. The truth is that over time, to survive as an entrepreneur, you need to learn that you can't trust markets. Eventually, markets tend to work out, but the timing can be awful, right? And you can trying to trust venture capital, for example, even though I spent a decade in it, you just can't do that. You can't depend on your ability to raise more money as a business model, for example. And a lot of entrepreneurs, as you know, are going through that right now, learning some hard lessons about that business model. So those are some of the big key lessons in my career that I've had to learn the hard way.
Yeah, it sucks, dude. Learning is a painful process. In many cases. Mark, what about books, tools, and resources that you recommend? What comes to mind for you?
Well, nothing specific other than, I'm a huge learner, huge reader, always have been. So many, many books over the decades and a lot of different types of books. So I got increasingly into science. Part of that is KYield. So I read books on biology. I'm a multidisciplinary guy, a big believer in it. And so you can learn an awful lot from biology that applies to computer science and vice versa. Philosophy, all of these different, economics is one of my main interest areas. And these days, of course, I consume an awful lot of shorter articles and papers, a lot of R&D work. So And then, I do listen to quite a few podcasts. There's nothing, I come across new ones and I check them out, right? Or somebody asked me to go on them. And so I had actually heard of you, which is unusual.
Oh, really?
I've asked and I'm not familiar with the name, but yeah, we have a lot to choose from. So there's no excuse to not learn these days.
Yeah, I know. I'm curious. Where did you hear it, or was it a friend of yours that mentioned the show?
I'm not really sure, but yeah, I definitely recognize it. And when I had visited your website before and I'd listened to some podcasts. So
Oh, I see. Yeah, it happens. Yeah, it's a funny thing. The reach of the show for me as the owner of the show or the host of the show, it's really hard to know. Like I've had so many weird stories. I'll tell you one. So when I was in South Africa, I mean, your one is an example. Like, never heard of you, but you know who I am. Like, it's a weird thing when that happens every time. So, like, I was in South Africa, and I phoned up a CEO, and I'm like, hey, man, I'm Matt Brown, and companies, blah blah, and I want to have some time with you to explore synergies, what have you. And he's like, are you the Matt Brown from like the Matt Brown Show? And it's like, yeah, are you the guy that's always going live on LinkedIn? You know what I mean? So, like, it's weird how a platform like the Matt Brown Show actually builds brand and relationships. It's a powerful thing. I think everyone should have their own show. Like, if you have a website, you should have your own show. That's basically, yeah. Because I mean,
it could have been LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and it could well have been that. So
could have been, could have been. Although, to be honest, I actually took a break from social media for a whole year. So if you saw anything, it would have been from someone who's been on the show sharing the stuff. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, look, Mark, appreciate you coming onto the show, brother. And thanks for coming on the show and lending your perspective, and, wishing you guys all the best on the next stage of your growth.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having this show. It's a nice value for folks. So have a great one. Thank you.
All right, Mark. Thanks, everybody.